April 12, 1861. The first cannon fires at Fort Sumter, echoing across the harbor. Smoke rises into the morning sky, and with it, a nation is torn apart. Brother against brother. A war that would become the bloodiest conflict in American history had begun. This is the story of the American Civil War. A war not just of battles and generals, but of ideals, courage, and sacrifice. It started decades earlier. The North and the South divided not just by geography, but by economy, culture, and morality. The North, industrialized, booming, and against slavery. The South, agrarian, dependent on enslaved labor, and unwilling to change. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, a man who vowed to stop the spread of slavery. To the South, this was a declaration of war. South Carolina seceded, followed by 10 other states. The United States was no longer united. Conventions were held. Politicians argued. The country stood at the edge of an abyss. Diplomacy failed, and on that fateful April morning in 1861, the first shots were fired. The war ignites. 1861. The war erupts. The first battle, Bull Run, was supposed to be a quick northern victory. Civilians even rode out from Washington to watch, treating it like a grand spectacle. But war is never quick. Confederate forces, led by General Stonewall Jackson, held their ground. The Union troops fled in chaos. The realization hit: this war would be long, brutal, and costly. Recruitment soared on both sides. Young men, barely out of their teens, enlisted in droves, believing they'd be home by Christmas. They were wrong. The bloodshed intensifies. 1862. Battles raged across the country. Shiloh, Antietam, Fredericksburg, names that would be forever etched in blood. Antietam alone saw 23,000 casualties in one day, America's bloodiest day. But amidst the carnage, a shift. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. January 1, 1863. Slavery abolished in the rebelling states. The war was no longer just about reunification. It was about freedom. For African Americans, this was a beacon of hope. Thousands enlisted in the Union Army, fighting not just for a nation, but for their own liberation. The turning point, July 1863. Gettysburg, the turning point. For 3 days, the Union and Confederate armies clashed in a battle that would decide the fate of the nation. 50,000 men fell, and then the infamous Pickett's Charge. The Confederates surged forward and were torn apart. The South would never recover. Lincoln stood on the battlefield months later, delivering a speech that would echo through time. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The war's darkest hours. The war dragged on. Disease claimed more lives than bullets. Soldiers starved. Entire towns were left in ruins. In the South, food shortages led to riots. In the North, war fatigue set in. Newspapers cried out for an end. Peace protests grew, but Lincoln, unwavering, pressed forward. He knew the Union had to win, or the sacrifices would be in vain. The final offensive, 1864. General Ulysses S. Grant takes command. Unlike his predecessors, he fights relentlessly. He wages total war, marching through the South, destroying supply lines, burning cities. Sherman's march to the sea leaves a trail of destruction from Atlanta to Savannah. The South is broken. April 9, 1865. Appomattox Courthouse. General Robert E. Lee, weary and defeated, surrenders. The war is over. The aftermath, but peace did not come easily. Lincoln, the man who had held the Union together, would not live to see its reconstruction. On April 14, 1865, he was shot at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. The nation plunged into mourning. With Lincoln gone, Andrew Johnson took over, but the road to rebuilding was steep. The South lay in ruins, its economy shattered, its people struggling to move forward. The newly freed African Americans faced an uncertain future. Laws were passed, rights were debated, and the long struggle for equality had only just begun. Legacy: the Civil War had changed America forever. Over 600,000 lives lost. Cities burned, families torn apart. But from the ashes rose a new nation. One that, though still divided in many ways, had taken its first steps toward true freedom and unity. A century later, the echoes of the Civil War could still be heard. The fight for civil rights, the struggle for equality, the sacrifices of those who had fought and died were not in vain. The American Civil War, a tragedy, a lesson, and a turning point that shaped the nation. We remember not just the battles, but the men, the sacrifices, and the unbreakable will of a nation striving to be whole. America, reborn from the ashes of war.